Yes, I am.
All
All
right.
right. So, all right. I think we're about ready to start. What do you think?
Absolutely. I'll share my, am I sharing my screen? I'm sharing my
Yeah,
screen.
it's
Yes.
already shared. So we're up
Already
and
shared.
running. And this is
Fantastic.
very exciting to see where people are coming from. So welcome. I'm Dr. Susan Keller Mathers, and I am the host today for our little mini C. I want to let you know that this is being recorded. And please, if you'd like to share where you're from in the chat, that's always fun. If you have questions, comments, put it in the chat. And at the end, when we finish up, if people want to stay, we'll go back to the chat, and Dr. Firestien has agreed to stay longer and answer questions if you have them. So mini C, this is new. This is the first one. And of course, we've got to start with Dr. Firestien. No, it'll be done well. No pressure. And, we have in March, every year we have the Creativity Expert Exchange Conference. And it was decided that really alum and faculty should share more. People ask us to. So the idea of putting a mini C together is to have these short little episodes throughout the year to keep us all jazzed and share and continue to build our community. So thank you for coming in for this. Today we have scholars that are researchers, scholars that are practitioners in the audience, creativity students and alumni. We have individuals that are interested in a deeper understanding of their creativity. Other people have come in because they want to sharpen their ability to teach, to train, and facilitate others. So we welcome all of our members today who have joined us from all different communities and throughout the world, from Philly and South California, Pennsylvania, Albuquerque, Puerto Rico, the Netherlands, Ottawa, Memphis, Florida, Atlanta, and other places as well. So thank you for coming. So let me tell you just a little bit more. And if you'll go to, oh, you're already on the second one. Wow, you're so, no, go to the second one. There we go. Thank you. So with the mini C today, October 12th, you'll see that there are also two other mini Cs coming up. October 27th, our colleague, Dr. Molly Hollinger, will do creativity and well-being. And November 16th will be creativity and AI with Dr. David Yates. So we suggest that you also mark your calendar for those. We will, in addition, have two more in the spring, one in February. We'll all talk about creative teaching and learning and the TIM model. And Dr. Puccio will do one in April. And also March 7th and 8th will be our creativity expert exchange. So if you'll go to the next slide. Well, we can't go through an event without at least reminding people of all of the cool things we have going on in the academic world here at the Center for Applied Imagination. So we, of course, have the master's degree and an advanced graduate certificate in creativity and change leadership. And again, the Creativity Expert Exchange. And we also put up here one of our micro credentials, which is only 2 courses. And that is in applied creative thinking and problem solving, which is particularly applicable to our talk today. So you'll see that on the bottom is our listing. And we'd like to also show you just a short little video.
You have sound?
Before I found the program, I remember feeling very lost. I knew that there was something missing from my life. I just didn't know what it was. When I first saw someone facilitating, that was the first beacon of hope for me. The ability to actually lead people in a collaborative, productive conversation, to get to goals that were important to them in a way that was effective and so generative was really magical.
Lovely. Lovely. So it's my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Roger Firestien. Now, I could tell you that he's presented programs in innovation for over 600 organizations, or I could tell you his expert view is in New York Times, Fast Company, Forbes. I could tell you that he has a 9-part series on innovation in Open Sesame, or 7 books, hundreds of articles, president of Innovation Resources, founding member of the Society for Creativity in Medical Education, guest lectured Jacobs School of Medicine. That's his bio. I put it in the chat. What I really, and he doesn't know I'm doing this. What I
love it. I love your surprises.
What I really want to share with you is what I believe is extraordinary, and that is Roger's commitment to educating others. As a professor emeritus, he continues to teach courses, inspire students with passion, graciously shares resources, purposely develops low-cost books and free materials so that he can spread creativity to all. So even though he's retired, he is an incredibly important member of our team, continues to support the Center for Applied Imagination. Please welcome my good friend, Roger.
Oh, Sue, thank you. Thank you. That's just so kind. Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be here. My goal is to give you some value from this as soon as possible. And I love the balloons. Thank you so much. And so let's get started. So the title of this presentation is called Why We Don't Solve the Real Problem. And it's based on my book, Solve the Real Problem. But before we get started, I think it might be fun to kind of get us in the mood to have a little music. So this is a piece called Classical Gas by Mason Williams. My friend Bobby LaBelle and I performed it in my little music studio. And so here we go. That was actually the first song that he did. So, all right. Bobby always makes me sound a lot better. Thanks for the smiles there. So, all right. As I mentioned earlier, this is based on my latest book called Solve the Real Problem. We did a wonderful book opening for this, was it 2 weeks ago on the September 21st? Bobby played and Sue was there and we had a wonderful time. And so I'm just delighted to be able to share a portion of that talk with you today. So here's a quote I'd like you to consider. You might want to consider when you start the book out with this. For every complex problem, there's an answer that is clear and simple and wrong. And based on 45 years of experience working with thousands of people in hundreds of organizations, when it comes to solving problems that are ambiguous, that are complex, that are dangerous, that need creative ideas, 99% of the time, what we think is the problem is actually not the problem. You see, it's a symptom of the problem, or what the boss thinks is the problem, or a knee-jerk reaction to the problem, or the first impression of what you think is the problem. So the question is, why are we so bad at this? Well, it's my contention that we've been taught to find answers to problems, not to question the problem itself. Because in most of our formal education, problems have been presented to us. And so let's try this. I'm going to open up the chat here. And as soon as you have the answer to this, I just want you to put it in the chat if you would. Okay, so everybody ready? Thumbs up. You ready for this? Okay, here's the first question. Ready? First question is make sure you have your cursor on the right thing. What's 3 plus 3? Ah, excellent. Okay, very, very good. Okay, how about this one? What's the capital of France? Boy, you guys are 2 for 2 on this. Paris, Paris, Paris. How about this one? How about this one? This might trip you up. What's the name of the third planet from the sun? There we go. Glad you know that. Okay, excellent. All right. Thank you, guys. You see, it's my contention that we're still using the same strategies that we used in elementary school to solve complex, non-routine, difficult, and potentially dangerous problems. Because once again, we've been taught to find answers to problems, not to question the problem itself. I want to tell you a little story. The story is called Dancing with Coyotes. And up until a few years ago, my friends Larry and Dan lived in this wonderful place called Placerville, California. Placerville is a wonderful little mining town. It sits at the base of the Sierra Nevada mountains. Larry and Dan have 2 little dogs, Razy and Lodi, and they love to walk their dogs on their property. But one day, Dan sighted a coyote on the property, and there was word in the area that coyotes were out there snatching little dogs, never to see your little dogs again, okay? So Larry and Dan didn't want Razy and Lodi to get eaten by a coyote. So here's the question. What problem needs to be solved? Just put what problem you think needs to be solved in the chat. What problem needs to be solved? How can you keep your dogs safe? Good. How to keep them safe? Good. How to stop eating the coyotes? Where to find out walk their dogs? Okay. Why so many coyotes? Yeah, okay. How to protect the dogs, how to keep the pup safe. Beautiful. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that. So here's how Dan defined the problem. Dan defined the problem as how to get rid of the coyotes. That's fair. Okay. So you see, it's legal to shoot coyotes in Placerville because they're considered a menace. But Dan is a very kind-hearted person. He could never shoot a coyote. And so Dan needs a safe way to get rid of the coyotes. So he finds a wildlife rehabilitator. This is wildlife rehabilitator Dave. And what wildlife rehabilitator Dave says, he says, well, I tell you, let's do this. Let's set some humane traps for the coyotes, okay? And then once we trap them, we'll relocate them to the Sierra Nevada mountains. Dan says, that's fantastic. I love that idea. What's it going to take? Well, wildlife rehabilitator Dave says, I recommend 2 Acme super duper humane coyote traps for a cost of about $300 each. Dan goes, sign me up. Let's do it. Okay. So the traps are out. Everybody's happy. Dan is going to capture the coyotes. Everybody's going to be safe. Dan's going to be a hero. So unfortunately, the 2 traps didn't work. All he caught was a fox and a grumpy raccoon. So Dan reasoned, he said, well, let's see. If 2 traps don't work, 4 traps, maybe we need more traps, okay? So Dan goes out now and he buys 2 more traps. And now he has 4 Acme super duper humane coyote traps in the Great Coyote Trapping Adventure, okay? For a cost of $1,200. Dan checks the traps for weeks. No coyotes traps. And the dogs are still in danger of becoming a quick meal if they go for a walk. Now, a little bit about coyotes. Coyotes are pack animals, and they're also nomads. They follow the food. Now, if there's no food source for the coyotes, they will generally move on. Now, one way to look at the problem was Dan's view, was how might we eliminate the coyotes? Now, another way to look at the problem, as many of you mentioned, was how might we keep our little dogs safe? Now, if you focus on the problem of how might we eliminate the coyotes, you come up with ideas like shooting coyotes and coyote traps. But what if you focused on the other question? How might we keep our little dogs safe? You come up with ideas like put the little dogs in the car, take them a couple miles down the road for a safe place. Dan never did trap a coyote and no potential food source. The coyotes moved on. All right. Now, Dan saw the problem is getting rid of the coyotes, and all of his energy was going into the coyote problem and not the real problem, which was to keep the little dogs safe. Dan's a very smart, a very intelligent, bright, talented man, and if he can fall victim to solving the wrong problem, so can the rest of us. So here's one thing that we can do right now, to improve our problem-solving ability. And that one thing is don't trust your first instinct. Don't trust your first instinct. You know, remember when you were in school and you took those tests, those multiple choice tests, you know, and you kind of got down to like there was always a question or two that you weren't quite sure what the answer was. Is it A, is it C, is it B, or is it D? You just weren't quite sure. It could be either one. So here's the question. What was the advice? Go to the chat. What was the advice that you were given? If you weren't quite sure which one it was, it could be A, it could be C. What was the advice? Read the question again, okay? C. In doubt, answer C. Take the middle answer. Go with your first instinct. Go with your gut. Go with the most right answer. Okay, trust your first choice. Absolutely. Beautiful. Okay, so trust your first choice. Absolutely. Okay, so here's the advice that I got, as many of you did. Go with your first impression. It's usually the right answer. Go with your first impression. It's usually the right answer. Friends, that is absolutely false, okay? As a matter of fact, the GRE, when preparing for the GRE test, in the 2000 edition of How to Prepare for the GRE, the folks said, exercise great caution if you decide to change an answer. Experience indicates that many students who change answers change to the wrong answers. Barron's got it wrong. So that's bad advice, and it is absolutely not true at all. See, going with what your first impression of what you think is correct is known as the first instinct fallacy. And it's based on the belief that you should avoid changing answers when taking tests. Your first instinct, going with your gut, is best. Yet research has shown that most test takers who change their answers change them from incorrect to correct. So when you change your answer, you actually improve your score. As a matter of fact, in 33 studies from 1928 to 1984, not one of those studies found that test takers were hurt by changing their answers. So why do we trust first instincts anyway? The answer, it feels better. It feels better. You see, it feels worse to change a correct answer to an incorrect answer. And we remember changing the right answer to the wrong answer because it hurts us, right? Now, when you discover you've made this mistake, you start beating yourself up by saying, well, if only I had, if only I had, if only I had. This happens to be in the grocery store, okay? Probably happened to you. You're in the grocery store line, right? Okay, looking around. That line over there, it's moving faster. It's moving faster. Okay. Looking around, it's still moving faster. Looking around. So what do? Zoop! You go over to that line. Then what happens? That line stalls. This one moves faster. You go, if only I had, if only I had. That's the first instinct fallacy. Now, a simple way to sum up the first instinct fallacy is what we first think is the answer is not the answer. What we first think is the answer is not the answer. So I'd like to introduce you to a new fallacy, a fallacy that we came across when we wrote the new book, and it's called the first problem fallacy. Now, a simple way to sum up the first problem fallacy is what we first see as the problem is not the problem. What we first see as the problem is not the problem. You see, Dan defined the problem as how to get rid of the coyotes, when in fact, and that's what he saw first, when in fact the real problem was how to keep the little doggies safe. So one thing I want you to get from today, at least one thing, is what you first see as the problem is usually not the problem. As Sue mentioned, we're very fortunate to have a 9-part series on innovation on the Open Sesame e-learning platform. If you go to my website, rogerfirestien.com, scroll down, find Open Sesame. We had such a wonderful time doing it. One of our former graduates, Dan Richardson, who's also a videographer and a director, did all the videography work on it. And so I want to show you one of the videos that we released. And this video is called How to Get Better Ideas, Solve the Real Problem. It's about 5 minutes. So just give me a thumbs up when we have sound.
Creativity is not coming up with a great idea. The key to creativity is solving the right problem.
Here's what Albert Einstein had to say about his approach to problem solving when he was asked, if some imminent disaster threatened the world and you had 1 hour in which you knew you could save it, how would you spend your time? Einstein replied, I would spend the first 55 minutes identifying the problem and the last 5 minutes solving it. For the formulation of a problem is often far more essential than its solution, which may be merely a matter of mathematical or experimental skill.
Most people believe that creativity is coming up with a great idea. Not so. The key to creativity is solving the right problem. The fact is, it doesn't do any good to generate ideas for solving the wrong problem. We've been taught that the initial impression of the problem is the right one.
We have a good reason for this. School already sets up the problem for us. 2 + 2 = 4. What is the capital of Poland? Warsaw.
But to increase your likelihood of success, it's crucial to challenge your initial impression of what you think is the problem. Here's an example. In 1980, the conventional wisdom was that the cause of a heart attack was cholesterol buildup in an artery of the heart. The thinking was that the buildup would progress over time until it completely blocked blood flow through the artery and caused a heart attack. When a heart attack occurred, doctors believed that the only treatment was to reduce the patient's oxygen requirements by reducing their heart rate and controlling their blood pressure with medication, while also aggressively treating any complications. That was until a breakthrough study examined autopsies of a multitude of heart attack victims. The study revealed that it was not just plaque that caused the arteries to close and patients to die. In fact, less than 50% of the blockage was due to the plaque. Instead, the plaque had become unstable and ruptured or fissured. When this happened, it exposed the cholesterol core in the plaque to the blood in the artery. The body's natural response is to form a blood clot over the plaque and seal the rupture. As a result, it was the clot that caused the sudden and complete occlusion of the artery. A blood clot caused the heart attack. Game changer. Plaque in the heart was part of the problem. But for years, the medical field accepted it as the core issue because they didn't stop to question their collective understanding. Doctors were focused on fixing the immediate problems with their heart attack patients, so they weren't looking further to determine what they were missing. Sound familiar? Now, when a heart attack victim reaches the hospital, the primary focus is to save heart muscle by administering a clot buster medication or by stenting the artery. Stents are small tubes that form a passageway through the blood clot. As a result, dramatically more heart attack patients not only survive, but are spared life-changing complications. Your problem doesn't have to be as dire as a heart attack to benefit from deeper exploration. Identifying the real problem will always lead to more fruitful solutions. So how do you find the real problem? Ask lots of questions. But these just aren't any kinds of questions. These are creative questions. You see, the language you use to describe a problem is going to dictate the kinds of solutions you generate. For example, we don't have enough money. Good or bad question? Answer, bad question. In fact, it's a statement. When you hear that statement, your brain says, okay, we don't have any money, decision made, move on. Let's try a different approach. How might we raise the money for this project? Or how might we reduce the cost of this project? Good and creative questions. Questions framed in this way provoke your mind to search for solutions. They tell your brain, let's go find some answers. And because we're using the word might, these can be any answers. We haven't made any decisions yet. Look for options. When you're redefining the problem, you want questions that open up your thinking. So use these phrases to begin your creative questions. How might? How to? What might be all the ways to? In what ways might I? When cardiologists, heart surgeons, and researchers were investigating heart attacks, they might have asked questions like, how might we reduce the number of deaths from heart attacks? What might be all of the factors contributing to a heart attack? How might we reduce the recovery time for heart attack victims? Give it a try. Next time you need to solve a tough problem, back up a step. Don't immediately accept your initial impression of the problem as the real problem. Just as you generate creative ideas for solving a problem using brainstorming, you can also brainstorm ways to redefine a problem. Use these guidelines to generate creative questions. Defer judgment, strive for quantity, seek wild and unusual questions, combine and build in other questions. When you're facing a tough situation, try this exercise. Write down at least 15 different ways to restate your problem. Then select the question that describes the main obstacle keeping you from your goal. Only then begin generating ideas to solve your problem. Coming up with over 15 creative questions should take only about 5 to 10 minutes. It's time well spent, guaranteed. The problem we see is the problem we solve. Invest the time identifying the true problem and generate ideas only after you've clearly identified the best problem. The time you spend identifying the real problem prevents you from generating ideas that are off target and action plans that have no traction. And remember, to get ahead of the herd, get creative.
right, to get ahead of the herd, get creative. Right? That's the bumper on the back of all of these. There's a kind of a joke about all of these. And Sue and David and I will tell you that joke a little later. Okay, we're focusing, and we'll talk more about this. This is one of the Open Sesame series. We'll talk more about this after we would come into the questions at the end. So we're focusing on finding the real problem because it doesn't make any sense to generate ideas for solving the wrong problem. Now, most of the time, it's been my experience that what most people associate with creativity is brainstorming and generating lots and lots of ideas. But it's been my experience in the last 45 years that the stage of the creative process where the problem is clarified is as important or even more important than generating lots of ideas, because it doesn't make any sense to generate ideas for solving the wrong problem. To clarify problems, we ask questions, but not just any kinds of questions. We ask creative questions. And I love this quote from Stuart Firestien, no relation, in his book, Ignorance, How It Drives Science. Stuart says this. Stuart says, questions are more relevant than answers. Questions are bigger than answers. One good question can give rise to several layers of answers, can inspire decade-long searches for solutions, can generate whole new fields of inquiry, and can prompt changes in entrenched thinking. Answers, on the other hand, often end the process. Answers, on the other hand, often end the process. So we use creative questions to clarify problems, like I talked about in the video, because the language we use to describe a problem is going to determine how we go about solving that problem. And creative questions begin with these phrases. Many of you are familiar with this: how to, how might, in what ways might, what might be all the. And so I'd like you to notice the difference. There's a big difference between saying we don't have enough money or it's too expensive, as opposed to how to raise the money or how might we reduce the cost. Those first two statements block your thinking, and they send a message to your brain that there aren't any ideas out there. So why bother even looking for those ideas? Those two questions open to your mind to the possibility of solving the problem. They provoke your brain to start searching for ideas for solving it. I get this sometimes. I don't have time to clarify the problem. I have to get stuff done. And usually they don't use the word stuff in there, right? All right. So, and now some research from the Creativity in a Laboratory. This was fascinating. When we were working on the book, I came across this study, and it was just absolutely fascinating. In a study on problem construction, researchers instructed half of the study participants to restate the problem in a variety of ways before starting to work. The other half of the participants were instructed to just read the problem and immediately solve it. Here's the results. Those individuals that restated the problem in a variety of different ways produced more original and higher quality solutions than those participants who went right to work and did not spend time redefining the problem. Fascinated by this. So I was curious, well, how much time did they spend redefining the problem? So Mark Runco was one of the researchers on here. So I emailed Mark. I said, in your study, I don't find where they're talking about the time frame you give them. So here's what Mark said. The researchers didn't place a limit on the amount of time the group was allowed to generate problem restatements. They were told to take your time. There are no time limits. But in actuality, the students took about 5 to 6 minutes to finish generating a list of problem statements from which they selected a problem and generate ideas to solve. 5 to 6 minutes, that's it. So even with no formal or structured training, like many of you folks have with your degrees in creative studies, on how to formulate problems, just the instructions by the researcher to take your time and generate a variety of ways to restate the problem, the subjects created better solutions when they took 5 to 6 minutes to generate alternate definitions of the problem. 5 to 6 minutes. So the question is, can you afford to spend 5 minutes to find the real problem? The other question is, can you afford not to? Okay. One of my dear friends is Phil Kepler, partner in SK Hereford's. Those are here's cattle that you saw us herding around here. Here's what Phil says about clarifying problems.
The creativity helps you not look at things as a problem. It's trying to find the solution, and that's the exciting thing about it. Things aren't problems anymore. It's just difficult situations, and you're trying to find the solution. Now, I sit there and say, how does this work? Let's sit and I go, just take a minute, shut the brain down just for a second, and reboot it, and think, let's creatively solve this without losing your temper, without frustration. As the sweat is dripping down your forehead, sweat is getting into your eyes are stinging. You have to think and get calm and think creatively. How can we make this work? And it's interesting how the calm comes over you and that whole negative feelings leave you and you get to focus on the job and things just start to happen.
Thank you, Phil. So as I was writing Solve the Real Problem and pondering the topic, this idea occurred to me. You see, generating many different definitions of the problem using creative questions is an incredibly simple concept, but people find it revolutionary because people are familiar with brainstorming and generating many ideas. Generating many different problem definitions to clarify the problem to solve is something that most people have really never experienced. And folks, I worked with a bunch of professionals yesterday, administrators in hospital situations. When we went through and practiced generating creative questions, it just was absolutely opened their mind, changed the atmosphere in the room, changed the way they solved the problem just by teaching them how to create creative questions. Because we've been taught to find answers to problems, not to question the problem itself. So I want to talk a little bit about the book. Here it is. It's available on Amazon, or you can just go to my website and order it. If you order it from my website, you'll get an autographed copy. See, the single focus of the book is how to find the real problem in any situation you might encounter, personal or professional. And in writing the book, I interviewed people from these areas, from medicine, aviation, engineering, business, government, military, transportation, negotiation, advertising, agriculture. The person I interviewed from negotiation is Louise Nielsen, and she's on the call. Louise, thank you. I owe you a book. Thank you so much. And I asked them, Louise, I asked you this story. I said, can you tell me a story from your life or your work when you discovered the problem you were trying to solve was not the problem at all? And they were wonderfully generous in their responses. We had wonderful conversations. And so when I analyzed the responses, I found that they settled into 4 mindsets. And a mindset is a particular way of thinking. And the 4 mindsets were the keys to finding the real problem. And here's the mindsets: challenge your assumptions, get an outside perspective, see the big picture, look for all of your details. Challenge your assumptions, get an outside perspective, see the big picture, look for all the details. Okay. This is a story that I believe hits on all 4 mindsets. So if you would get ready to, would you do the raise hand thing? I'm asking you to raise your hand here. Okay. So here's the first question. I have a couple questions to ask you. How many of you have flown on an airplane? Just raise your hand there. Good. Okay, that works. Okay, good. Excellent. How about this? How many of you have flown on a Boeing 747? That's the airplane with the big hump. Okay, good. Thank you. Good. Okay, so here's the story about that. This is a story about how 2 pieces of scrap metal saved the airline industry billions of dollars and kept billions of people safe. In the late 1970s, a young engineer named Scott Kempshaw was assigned to the cockpit design team of the Boeing 747. And here's the Boeing 747 right there, that nice big hump up there. Cool looking airplane. On Scott's 4th day of work, this mechanism arrives on his desk. And this was the windshield wiper mechanism for the 747. His job as this young engineer was to get this FAA certified. So his problem to solve was how to get this FAA certified. Okay, fine. And it had an arm sticking out of it. It had a windshield wiper on there. There was a sensor here. And so because of its hump, when the plane would take off and land, the airflow would lift the wipers off of the windshield. So in other words, the pilot couldn't see the runway on takeoff and landing on rain or snow. Not a good thing if you're flying an airplane with 541 people on it. You want to see that runway on takeoff and landing, whether it's snowing or not, okay? Now, this device calculated the airspeed. It then used a motor to tighten a spring that would then hold the wiper to the windshield. Okay. Now, the mechanism was complicated with lots of moving parts. It could easily break down. To replace the mechanism, the 747 had to be taken out of service for 10 days. The mechanics had to take the front off of the airplane completely to get to the mechanism. And to replace the wiper mechanism one time cost $100,000. Scott's 4th day of work, get it certified. Later that day, Scott gets a tour of the airplane assembly building. And when I was talking with Scott about it, he said, this was just amazing. He said, I was awestruck. He said, I walked into the building and here's a 747 just about completed and another one just about completed, and another one just about completed. He said, the buildings are so big that clouds form in the ceiling of them. So Scott is on this tour. And he comes across this bin with aluminum scraps in them. And these are Scott's words. He says, they're about 6 inches long and they've got a curve to them. And so Scott asked his guide, he said, well, what are these? And his guide said, well, we had a design for a railing that was a little too long, so we'd had to clip these pieces off. Scott says, well, could I take a few of them? And his guide says, sure, they're just scrap, right? Scott's words again. They looked like little scoops to me. If I attached these curved pieces of metal on the windshield wipers, the air would flow over them. The curved shape would create a downward force like a sail on a boat. The sail would push the wiper down the windshield. And as the airplane accelerated, the air pressure would increase and increase the pressure on the sails. Okay. So he riveted a couple of these metal pieces onto the windshield wiper. He said the first time it didn't work. The wipers would still come up as the airplane accelerated. But then I adjusted them a little bit and a little bit and a little bit and a little bit more. And pretty soon, the wipers wouldn't lift off the windshield at all, no matter what we tried. We tried rain, we tried snow, we tried ice. They would stay right down in the windshield the whole time. Name of the invention? Flow spoilers. And that was Scott Kempschel's first design award. And here they are on the 747. You can see them right here where they're circled. All right, I'll point to them there. Okay. And here's another view of them a little bit closer. They're now on most aircraft because they're just so efficient. Okay. Scott's flow spoilers have protected the lives of more than 3.5 billion people who have flown on 747s. So let's look at the long-term results of Scott's invention. You see, this mechanism cost $10,000 each for a total of $20,000 per aircraft. That cost was immediately eliminated. This mechanism weighed 20 pounds each, adding 40 pounds to the aircraft. That weight was immediately eliminated. The last thing you want to do is add weight to an aircraft if you don't have to. The lifespan of the 747 is about 30 years. And because the mechanism is complicated and it has many moving parts, it would need to be replaced about every 10 years. So let's see, $100,000 times 3 equals $300,000 per airplane to replace the windshield wiper mechanism. Boeing delivered 1,567 747 airplanes. So $300,000 times 1567. Well, let's see. In 1980 dollars, that's $470,100,000. In 2023 dollars, that's $1,715,956,310.68 to replace the windshield wiper mechanism. With Scott's invention, the airplane doesn't have to be taken out of service. The wiper blades can be changed while the 747s on the tarmac. It takes about 2 hours for a cost of about $2,000. All right, challenge your assumptions, get an outside perspective, see the big picture, look for all of the details. So let's dig into this a little bit with our friend Scott here. Challenge your assumptions. Boeing assumed the solution was the wiper mechanism. And Scott's job, Scott's problem to solve was to get it certified by the FAA. That's it. Now, if Scott had not challenged the assumption that there might be a better way to keep the wipers on the windshield, he wouldn't even have noticed the scrap metal. Get an outside perspective. Scott was a fresh pair of eyes. This was his 4th day on the job, and he brought a new way to look at the problem. See the big picture. Scott looked beyond his immediate task of getting the wiper mechanism certified, and the real problem was not getting it certified. The real problem was keeping the wipers on the windshield. And look for all the details. Scott looked at all aspects of the problem, and he saw the details in the scrap pieces as a way to solve the problem. And Scott Kempschel helped keep 3.5 billion people safe. And I'm proud to say that Scott and I have been friends since we were 14 years old. So it was just, when I interviewed Scott on this, he's just this marvelous fellow, and kind of grew up. He lives in Florida now. And so I talked with him about it. He goes, well, I got a couple stories here, but then there's this thing about this windshield wiper mechanism. So, and I said, he said, it feels so good. He said, when I'm walking with somebody and there's a 747 parked there, and he goes, I invented those. Kept 3.5 billion people safe. Thank you, Scotty. Okay, so to find the real problem, pause. Don't accept your initial impression of the problem as a real problem. Ask creative questions, generally at least 10. How to, how might, what might all be other ways. Choose the creative question that best defines your problem, and then generate ideas to solve your problem. Pause, ask, choose. Okay, last thought. We started with coyotes, we're going to end with bees. Right? You see, Scott's flow spoilers cost Boeing almost nothing, yet they saved the airline industry millions, billions of dollars and kept 3.5 billion people safe. Scott asked a few creative questions, and he had the tenacity to try out his idea. You see, the leadership in Scott's department created an environment where he was encouraged to experiment with ideas, to challenge the status quo. Scott was also given the time to explore his ideas and the resources to test it. And when his scoops on the windshield wipers didn't work the first time, his project wasn't shut down because it failed. See, the fact is, if you're the leader in your organization, and most of you are, you have absolutely no ability to make someone come up with creative ideas. You can't make someone come up with creative ideas. You see, if you want bees to make honey, you can set up the bee box in the spring, which is the perfect time of the year. You can buy the best bee boxes available. You can arrange the bee box in the most beautiful place on your property. You can bring in a healthy queen, but you can't make the bees make honey. Reading a book on creativity or attending a creativity workshop or being a part of this webinar does not guarantee that you're going to be more creative. It's been my experience that trying to impose creativity from an external organizational mandate on people has been one of the major reasons why creativity and innovation initiatives in organizations fail. You can't force innovation, but you can free it. Thanks to my friend, Dr. Lee Kiley. You can't force innovation, but you can free it. You see, Scott didn't submit his idea to a company-wide idea collection system. He didn't take weeks to ponder the problem. He didn't get his idea approved by the Senior Vice President of Innovation or the Chief Innovation Officer, and he didn't come up with his idea in the company's brand new Innovation Center. All Scott did was ask a couple of creative questions. But there was something else going on when Scott made his discovery. The air was right. The air was right. The biologist and author Lewis Thomas has this to say about discovery in his book, The Lives of the Cell. I love this book. Thomas says this. He says, discovery cannot be prearranged in any precise way. The minds cannot be lined up in tidy rows and given directions from printed sheets. You cannot get it done by instructing each mind to make this or that piece for central committees to fit with the pieces made by the other instructed minds. It does not work this way. What it needs is for the air to be right. You see, if you want a bee to make honey, you don't issue protocols on solar navigation or carbohydrate chemistry. You put them together with other bees and you do what you can to arrange the general environment around the hive. And if the air is right, the science will come in its own season, just like pure honey. So if you want your people to be creative, if you want your people to look for problems to solve, make the air right. Make the air right. So what's one thing you can do what's one thing that you can do to make the air right? Pause. Ask. Choose. Thank you very much. Thank you. We're going to open it up for questions. So
Yep, we have a couple of things, things to tidy. And Roger,
let's do those first. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really look forward to reading your book.
Thank you. What has your name on it already? There it is. Go ahead. We'll take care of this and I'll answer any questions you have.
Okay, that'd be great. So just want to remind people, we have the next mini C series coming up the end of this month with Dr. Molly Hollinger. So please join us if you can. There will be a different Brightspace registration going out. If you'll go to the next slide, which is the last one. Also, these are some ways that you can keep informed and also know what kind of events we have coming up. And that is through Facebook and LinkedIn. There's our general website address. I want to thank everyone who came in throughout the United States, from Oregon to Puerto Rico, and our global community from Pakistan and Netherlands, Canada, Brazil, Italy, and India. And I might have missed a few, but those are the ones I knew of. So thank you. And we're going to end the session formally, but feel free to stay if you would like to ask some questions. And I'll pass it back over to my dear friend, Roger.
Yeah, I'll stop screen sharing. I can go for another 10 minutes or so till 1 o'clock. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And when you have your question, if you want to jump off, that's fine too. But just go ahead and open up your microphone and or what do you want to do? Sue, chat or microphone? What do we
can
got?
do either one. If they go in the, I'll make sure you get it.
Okay, great. So yeah, if they'll go in the chat if you want to send that over to me. So, but go ahead, open your microphones. What questions do you have? Comments? What do you got?
I had a question.
Yeah.
When working with a group, especially, but even just one person who, like, I work with authors and they already kind of think they have everything in the bag, you know? How do you convince? I mean, you've done a good job in this presentation of kind of convincing people the importance, but what about when they're really married to their content? How do you get them to kind of loosen their grip and think about the willingness to look at other problems or a different approach?
So what I would recommend to that is I would recommend that they talk to my publicist, Lori Ames. She's very good at that. Well, I think when someone is really, so I guess to answer that, it seems to me that it might be, in this case, if somebody's really wedded to that idea with an author and they own it themselves, that might be what you might need to go. But the other thing is you might take a little lesson from my friend Loree when she talks about negotiation. And she talks about showing people the relative advantage of doing something a little bit differently. And so she gives them 3 choices. And so one of the things you might want to consider, and I'm talking to Julianne, one of the things you might want to consider is you might say, so like, hey, I'm looking at this, and may I suggest maybe 3 things that might be helpful to you. Here's the first one. And I think it's got some relative advantage over this one or this one. So I'm thinking this one, but what do you think about these? Do you give them 3 options, right?
Mm-hmm.
And from there, they can choose those 3 options or one of those options, and that might be a way to take it forward with that. So does that help?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And then also just making sure that the environment is set up so that they're willing to try new ideas, so that they're willing to experiment with it just a little bit. And that really goes as far as your behavior towards them. What can you do as far as, how you interact with them that might open them up just a little bit more. The other thing is just ask them some creative questions around it. Well, how might, what might be all the other ways we might see doing this. So does that start? Is that?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. Thanks. Thought I might be able to hit it there. So, but don't hit it, let me know. So, all right.
Our dear friend, Louise Nielsen has one in the chat.
Okay. Dear friend, Louise Nielsen. Okay. Okay. Lewis almost has a poet of yes. Okay. Her question is, it's the air. Is air similar to the creative environment? Yes, the air is a creative environment. Yeah. But one of the things in talking about this, air really sticks. And when you talk to people about this, I've been working with some of my doctor friends because there's issues as healthcare and things that they're working on, particularly around quality. And their thing is like, we got to make the air right. We got to make the air right. And that's like, it's just sort of an eloquent way to describe what has to go on and accompany that with kind of a story around it. We need to make the air right here. So, and it is creative environment. Yeah. Thanks.
Cheryl had a question too.
All right. So let me just come back. Let me go to the chat here. Yes. Oh, do you have any tips for assessing if a problem is appropriate for creative problem solving? For example, if a company simply wants to come up with the next great idea in their field, how do you guide them to a good creative question? Well, what you do is we're working on that with the client right now who is wants to create a new idea for cosmetic products, right? And so we just started out with kind of it would be great if we created a product that did this. We gathered some data on it. And then what we did was we do a thing called a breakthrough lab that our friend David Yates moderates. We brought in some creative catalysts. Sherilyn, you've been a creative catalyst. And we had them just create a whole bunch of creative questions. And we came up with about 150 creative questions for the clients. They chose then the creative questions that they wanted to move forward on. We generated some ideas, about 600 ideas in about 20 minutes, I think, according to David. And I just got an email back from them recently, and they said, I wanted to tell you what's going on. They said, here's our product plot. And they said, please don't share this. Some that they're going to implement immediately, others a little bit further out. And one of the lines that she said, we have a product, we have an idea that came up in that session that we think R&D is going to take 5 years to develop. But when they do, it will change the brand dramatically. So that's what you do. So you just have them come up with a bunch of creative questions. The other thing is, to invent the next great new idea, that's not a question. Okay, that's like a statement. So you can't do anything with that. Right? So, start out, it would be great if we could create new products to do this, get the data out, then generate some creative questions. Did that help, Sherilyn? Did that get it?
Yes. I think assessing the problem is just something that Sometimes I struggle with like, is this a creative enough question?
Don't
Like,
worry about it. Don't worry
yeah,
about it.
so I think that helps. Thank you. If they just keep going for quantity.
Trust the process on that. Yeah. Let's see. If you want
Patrick, this one might be for our friend David Yates, and that is, how soon will this session be posted?
creativity AI.
How soon will the session about creativity and AI be posted on Eventbrite? So that's the third one in the series. So we have a couple questions around that, I think. One is, this video is going to be available. And then
Right.
two, how soon after that are the next, I don't know if we have an answer for that, David.
I tell you what, I'll go on to the next couple of questions, then we'll come loop back to David on that. So want to answer these. So does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so from Noor, how important is it to determine the complexity of the problem? We have learned that CPS is generally applicable to complex problems, but how strict is that criteria? Well, look, here's the deal. What I recommend to folks is like, don't use creative problem solving if you need to figure out what movie you're going to see tonight, where you're going to go to dinner, or how you're going to get from here to Denver. I mean, for heaven's sakes, just do it. I want to go to this movie. Great. This is what we're going to have for dinner. And the way to get to Denver is planes, trains, motorcycles, or buses. I don't know. Don't bother with that. Okay. Creative problem solving works well for stuff that's ambiguous, that's complex, that you don't have ideas for, that maybe scare you just a little bit, and that are vague. And I think if you take a look at and Creating a Flash, I talk about that, how to select the particular challenge to work on. Creating a Flash is the book, the 6th book that came out. So ownership, 3 criteria, you need to have some ownership around it. You want to be motivated to work on it, and you'd like to use some imaginative thinking. And the thing about the imaginative thinking is oftentimes you don't even know what the problem is. It's just kind of a goal out there. So creative problem solving is perfect for those complex issues. Estelle, I interpret the air to be a safe place to create. The air is a safe place to create. Absolutely. Fern, in the public service in Canada, we're trying doing that with some policy development initiatives. It's really critical to find the right problem. Yes, it's really critical to find the right problem. The way you find the right problem is you look at a whole bunch of them. You don't just pick one, right? And so if you get just the same principle applies when you're generating ideas. The better ideas come later on in the process. The more ideas you come up with, the greater your chances of getting a good idea. The more creative questions you come up with, the greater the chances of finding the real creative question. The other thing that happens too is that, and this occurred yesterday with this group I was working with, we were working on group issues. And so they came up with creative questions all together, and then they chose those creative questions as a group. So it's challenging, as many of you know, to converge, take a group to converge on creative questions. It takes a lot of time. But what it does do is it builds alignment around that. And so when people say, hey, this is the one we want to work on, and the reason why is that we've sweated through and we've worked through this and we've massaged this creative question, this is the one that we want to work on. It builds alignment and it builds commitment around that. That would be in the alignment and developing a creative space. Yeah, good. So, okay. Creative problems, also interpersonal problems. Another question to ask is, why is this important to you? And Louise, thank you, is right in here. We nailed that, and so your words are all over this. So should I read that passage of the book? Never mind. Thank you so much for your work on this. So there's several examples of mediation that Louise did in here. Do you have any strategies to get people to pause? How many get people to use the 4 mindsets? They might be closed to suggestions. Well, there's so much research out there that shows why this stuff works. But the thing is, duct tape, that's great, that works. 2 things. I think the first thing is, and once again, I want to go back to yesterday. These were nurse administrators, and these people work in high pressure, very challenging situations. And it was a 3-hour session, and it was based on solve the real problem. So essentially, I did yesterday very similar to what I did with you folks today, except at this stage of the process, what we did was we started to practice this stuff. So we did a warm-up first, okay? And the warm-up was, the warm-up is in the book. It's very silly, okay? It had to do with sea lions getting on a sailboat, how to get the sea lions off the sailboat. So they warm up a little bit on this, and they're like, okay. First off, you have to teach them how to make creative questions, because they want to do answers all the time. So have them practice doing creative questions, and you teach them that. You work with them on that. Then you let them go. They came up with all these creative questions. They selected some creative questions. The energy in the room just got to be fun and up. Then we worked on the challenges that they wanted to work on. And we had 3 areas that we worked on. We worked on communication, engagement, and quality. And so, and that's essentially kind of, it would be great if we get greater engagement. It would be great if we could, figure out why we make mistakes, stuff like that. That's it. It's just the overall goal. We generated creative questions around that. We selected some creative questions, and it was extremely valuable for them. So one, they need to warm up first. You can't dive right away. Just like, what I've taught all you folks have been through the program with me. It's always warm up first. Always warm up. Then you take that energy and you slide that right into the challenge, and away they go. So warming up first, Bernie, so they see the value of that, and then they'll go right into, they'll be fine. They'll go right into it. So yeah, does that help? Thumbs up.
Yes, yes, it does. I just have memories of being in meetings where they would jump into giving suggestions on how to solve it, but I don't know that they would be open to me pausing, reflecting, and go. And
no, they probably won't. Okay, they probably won't. Okay, and that's why you use a different strategy. That's why you get right in. That's why you come up with creative questions. You hit them. You go. So first, you do the diversion exercise of generating a bunch of creative questions. You warm up first, then work on the challenge at hand. So the pause, ask, choose. That's kind of a personal approach. So that's the take home for what you can do personally, how you can make the error right, how you can change it, how you can apply it personally in your life. Other strategies apply when you're working with groups. So yeah, thank you for all the thanks over here, guys. So
thank you.
Thanks. I have 1 o'clock. Roger rocks. Thanks, you Pablo. Thank you all for being here. Sue, David, if you want to stay on for just a couple minutes afterwards. And so we'll adjourn now. Anything else, Sue, David?
Just to kind of answer the question about creativity and AI, we certainly, after the creativity and well-being is completed, I would assume that's when we'll send out the next Eventbrite. So we have the one coming up the end of this month. We'll send that Eventbrite out pretty soon. And then once that's completed, we'll go to the next one.
And you can save the date. It'll be at noon. So, all right, good. So thank you all. So there's the books. Louise, you rocked it. You rocked it. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Great to see so many familiar faces.
Yes. Yeah. Take care, everyone.
David, if we